Good afternoon. Can you hear me well? First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we have this very important press briefing as it relates to Jackson's water crisis. I want to state emphatically that the city of Jackson is grateful for the support that we now are receiving from the state. We've been going it alone for the better part of 2 years when it comes to the Jackson water crisis. I have said on multiple occasions that it's not a matter of if our system would fail, but a matter of when our system would fail. I have stood before you not only in terms of our local media, but national media, and shared that the city of Jackson, even when we're not under a boil water notice, even when we're not contending at that present moment with low pressure, that we are in a constant state of emergency. And so now we are excited to finally welcome the state to the table and all of the valuable resources that they bring. Yesterday, I had a very productive discussion with leadership from the Department of Health and leadership from MEMA, and we talked about creating an alliance that would tackle this challenge together. And I state that I'm grateful for this support because I firmly believe that the residents of Jackson are worthy of this support. The residents of Jackson are worthy of a dependable, sustainable, and equitable system. And that is why we welcome this support. Before I go forward, I do want to clarify just a few inaccuracies that have gone forward. First and foremost, the city of Jackson has not distributed any untreated raw water. That is inaccurate. But we do encourage our residents to continue to abide by the boil water notice that has been in effect. I thank the leadership from the state for reiterating this boil water notice that has been in effect for several days. I also want to clarify and make clear, because this was a rumor that got out, that the city of Jackson has not cut off water to any resident. We never cut off water. The lack of water was due to a lack of pressure in the system, which we stated was complicated by the flood waters that we received. It is because of our transparency that the state is aware of the many challenges that our system is facing. It is because of our transparency that we know about the staffing shortages. It is because of our transparency that they know about the system issues. And it is because of our transparency they know about the numerous equipment failures that we have. This is a set of accumulated problems based on deferred maintenance that has not taken place over decades. So let's talk about what we do next. Let's look forward to the united front that we have now announced and we look forward to. We're grateful to add the state to our team for the betterment of our city, Jackson, and our water system. With the state advising us and assisting us, we look forward to the myriad of improvements that are sure to come. I want to thank all of the volunteers. I want to thank all of the city employees that have been tuned into this challenge daily. I want to thank the support of Hinds County and their leadership that have been instrumental in supporting the city of Jackson over the years, distributing water year after year and crisis after crisis. And so I think it is imperative that we all keep our eye on the ball. We were here 2 Februaries ago where we had system-wide failures, and the world was watching us. And the world is watching us again. And so we must continue to elevate our voices and say that the residents of Jackson are worthy. They are worthy of a dependable system. And we look forward to a coalition of the willing that will join us in the fight to improve this system that has been failing for decades. With that, I will open the floor for any questions that you have. I will go from right to left, starting back here. Yes.
Mayor, I spoke to the EPA last Friday, and Carol Kemper told me that there have been some critical failures to address personnel needs at the water treatment plant, Moby Curtis. I'm quoting here directly. We asked in an information request letter for their communications regarding staffing. In both documentation and communications, we did not see evidence of any efforts to recruit. So I don't know that they've tried to reach into that labor pool, meaning for Class A water operators and regular maintenance personnel. She continues, they could be reaching out to technical colleges. They could be holding recruitment events. They could be scheduling interviews. They could be putting in advertisements. This is what we do when we recruit. We're not seeing these types of things.
Well, I don't know how abreast of all of the recruitment efforts Ms. Kemper is at this time. I can tell you right now that we have 10 individuals that are training to be Class A operators right now as we speak. As you know, for a degreed person, it takes 2 years for them to be able to be certified as a Class A operator. And for a non-degreed individual, it takes as much as 6 years. Our Human Resource Division has gone as far as reaching out to other counties and traveling to work in this regard. We have made an agreement with the Army Reserves in order to bring in people. We have started working with the U.S. Water Alliance, and we have taken the instruction of the EPA. It was the EPA who encouraged us to become a part of the Rural Water Association. It was the EPA that encouraged us to become a part of the Mutual Aid Agreement. And on the heels of receiving 4 to 5 individuals to help in the immediate response, we got, on the eve of that happening, a response that they were unable to fulfill that because they had their own critical staffing challenges. And so the effort is ongoing. The effort, we have seen people come and be trained and leave in the midst of the process. And so we will continue to double down and encourage that, as well as augment our staff. And I'll tell you some other things that we're doing. Augment our staff with retired employees. We're looking to bring in retired employees that can work a maximum of 20 hours for the time frame prescribed without violating their retirement protocol or endangering their retirement. In addition to that, we're looking to do privatization, not privatization, let me say, a operations and maintenance agreement with a third-party firm that can help augment all of that, and that's what we're contending to do. I'll come back.
Mayor, yesterday the governor said that there's going to be plans to try to find a way to split costs between the city and state to try to fund these programs to get back up the code and get water flowing back in Jackson. Can you speak to that? What's that going to look like here in the city?
Give me a moment. Forgive me. We have a number of microphones sitting up here. Testing. Testing, testing. Okay, I'm back with you. Give me your question again.
Yes. Yesterday the governor announced plans to find a way to split costs between the city and the state between trying to get the water recovered here in Jackson. Can you speak to what extent you understand that process would be?
To date, I can just share with you the conversation that I had with the leadership from the health department and also from the leadership of MEMA, where they talked about taking on about 50% of that cost. We will be using ARPA funds and any available dollars that we have in order to meet our portion of that cost. I can share with you that I've had representation from the White House, and also I received a call from the infrastructure czar, Mitch Landrieu, that have shared with me that the White House is watching critically in terms of what is taking place here. And so we look forward to additional support from them. But we will take every available dollar, and I think that that's something I failed to speak to here. That the city of Jackson, in the process of this crisis, we have committed every dollar that we could find in order to meet this challenge. Not only have we committed $8 million for one water line, a 48-inch water line that helps support the service of water to South Jackson, which is most disproportionately affected by this challenge. We've put in millions of dollars in terms of weatherization of our water treatment facility due to what we've experienced in February, where the cold temperatures, the prolonged cold temperatures, crippled our water treatment facility there. We're spending money towards automating certain parts of the plant. We're trying to deal with the clear or the wells, the clear track wells at the fuel plant. And we're looking to make as many improvements as we can. But as I have stated before, this gets into quite possibly the billions of dollars. And so that is far beyond the city of Jackson's reach to be able to accomplish that on our own. Yes,
so
sir.
you say this is an ongoing problem. We spent the day in South Jackson talking to customers. They said the same thing. So what's the big piece that's missing? Is it a lack of funds, attention, coordination with the state? Do we need a new plant here, new pipes? What's the big piece that's been missing in order for you to be able to solve this problem for frustrated residents?
Certainly, if we could get a new plan on the table, I would defer to a new plan. But by and large, it is a lack of resources and the coordination. And that is why we're excited to have the coordination today. This is what we've been asking for, and so we have open arms in this process to welcome that coordination, welcome that support. There are areas of challenge that we have had with our raw water screens, and today I'm hearing discussions about bringing in temporary raw water pumps. I'm hearing discussions about bringing temporary raw water pumps into the fold to help support the input of water into the plant so that we can treat it appropriately and get it out. Often, our lack of being able to have requisite pressure going into the system is due to the fact that we don't have the appropriate amount of water coming into the system, or we're challenged due to those pumps, due to raw water screens, due to a number of system failures that cripple us and are unable to achieve. I believe that it certainly should be on the table when you have this number of repairs that need to be made, that you might be better served starting over anew. And so if that is something that we can accomplish, we would certainly welcome that. But in the alternative, we have to work with what we have.
You said billions, ballpark. How much money does the city need to fix this problem?
If we're just talking about the water distribution, right, I don't think that it's a stretch to say $1 billion for our water distribution system.
Can you describe your communications with the health department recently and when you were made aware of the possibility that the governor alluded to last night, that he found out on Friday that there's a possibility that the Obi Curtis plant could fail?
We spoke to the health department yesterday. I would estimate probably just a couple of hours before that press briefing. And I would describe that communication as encouraging. It was a good discussion. I appreciated that leadership and what they had to share. And they talked about bringing the full cavalry in order to support the hardworking people of our water treatment facility. These are individuals that are working long hours, that do know their craft, do know this water treatment facility. And I do want to make it clear that these are individuals that have more understanding and expertise than the average water operator, because Jackson has a unique system that is both conventional and membrane, and they use the combination of both of those processes in order to distribute water into the system. Usually what we experience in most water treatment facilities, surface water treatment facilities, is either conventional or membrane. And so to have them join in on those individuals who have been working hard was welcome news.
So you didn't know before yesterday about this assessment?
Yesterday was the first time that I was briefed. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Last night, Governor Reed said that the two main pumps and motors at O.B. Curtis went out about a month ago. Is that an accurate timeline? And were repairs being made? Were there plans to make repairs?
Well, first and foremost, I want to communicate that there are more than two pumps at O.B. Curtis. And so the two pumps going out did not cripple us. But I actually communicated this to the local media, I think about 2 to 3 weeks ago, where I talked about the repairs that needed to be made, that I talked about, one, they felt that they could make the repairs within the local vicinity, and that we would return that into service. And so that's ongoing. We have challenges with these pumps on a consistent basis. Sometimes it may be a simple fix that can be made right there at the water treatment facility. Sometimes it requires us to ship off this pump or that pump in order to make those repairs. And so that has been a part and parcel of the ongoing challenges that we have been dealing with consistently. That is why I've been lifting up the fact that we are in a constant state of emergency, because whether it's the raw water screens, whether it's the pump, whether it's the UV light, that isn't even a part of the order of consent with the EPA, we have acknowledged and we have identified additional challenges that are yet to be, that have yet to rear their head in a way that have brought the attention to the regulatory agencies. And so there are a number of failures. I will share with you that what is ideal. What is ideal is a system or a city that would have had a capital improvement plan over time, that would have looked at the life cycle of each piece of equipment in that plant and determined when that life cycle was set to end and scheduled its replacement over time. And so quite simply that didn't happen. And as it relates to the human capital, it would have been ideal if we had a workforce development program that as our seasoned water operators were coming to an age of retirement, we were training people for the 2 or 6 year period that was necessary in order to replace them. But I liken it to a car. If you change your oil, if you rotate the tires, if you check the fluid levels, then that vehicle is more likely to function well for you. But the moment that you don't have that routine maintenance and things get out of hand, then you have big system failures that cost you big. Yes, sir.
Mayor, we've seen some drone footage of the O.B. Curtis plant that doesn't show any visible flooding affecting it. Can you clarify how those high water levels did impact Curtis's ability to process and treat water?
Yeah. Well, I'm not certain when those drone images were actually taken, and so that may be, a bit misleading. But what happened is that due to the flood, they were receiving a different composition of water, right? A different makeup of water that made it more difficult to treat. And so if they didn't change the chemical composition of how they were treating it, then we would have left our residents in greater danger and a greater threat. And so that's why they were unable to push out more water, because they were making certain that they were effectively treating the water. And so that was directly associated with the water, the additional water coming into the plant.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I had a follow-up about...
I'll start here with the follow-up and then I'll return back this way.
You mentioned at the top of the press conference about there was no raw, untreated water introduced through pipes, unlike what the governor and I believe state health officer had mentioned last night. Can you clarify why, and again, I'm not trying to get into a tit for tat, I'm just wondering why there would have been even the possibility of that from their end saying something like that. That's a pretty big stretch from the water was safe to drink if you boil it versus this is untreated water.
Yeah. Well, I think that the main thing we want to emphasize to residents is to heed the warnings to boil the water. But I would just simply say that, as a non-engineer myself, I simply listen to the reports that I get from those who are the experts in the field, right? And so there may be some miscommunication as to what the exact challenge was, what was issued into the system, what was put into the system, and what was the registered threat. We know that the threat was the potential of raw water getting into the system, but it was recognized by those that treat the water, and they ceased putting out the water until they could come to a chemical composition that was actually healthy and could be sent out to the residents. But we are still under a boil water notice. If the boil water notice had been lifted prior to the events of this week, we would have reissued one due to the challenges that we have experienced in water pressure.
So it's your position that no untreated water has gone out to residents through the system?
That is what has been shared with me by our water operators. Okay. Yes.
So I just want to go back to the question of staffing and reaching out to staffing. Again, I'm quoting directly from the interview here. Contracting was the other thing we were looking for. We saw no information or correspondence that they were seeking a contract to staff O.B. Curtis. The mayor asked if that was an option, and I said, yes, it is. We do not dictate how you staff. How is it that the Environmental Protection Agency has no records in all partnership with the city of attempts to contract or seek new employees through interviews, job fairs, technical training? How is there no record?
I think that is because the EPA only sees completed transactions, right? And so they don't have a record of us meeting with companies like Veolia here in my office. They don't see the document trail of that,
But
right?
they requested those documents. They said they sent you an information request letter to find all information on the efforts to staff O.B. Curtis, and they did not receive
Well, that
any
would
evidence.
have been simply a calendar identification of the meetings that I was having. Until we reach those agreements, there's nothing to provide them. We've been waiting on a proposal from certain companies that we have not received, right? I don't want to go into great detail about that because that gets into some of the state's work at this point with those companies that we've been talking about.
How long, if you could tell me at least?
We've been working to look at bringing in a third-party company over a 6-month period or better. Yeah.
And is there another company that maybe would take less time? I mean, that's like a long...
So it's a matter of what they feel is in their best interest as a company. They want to talk about profitability. They want to talk about, how it is orchestrated, whether they're working at just O.B. Curtis or whether they're doing fuel, which actually does pretty well under its current operation. They want to talk about whether it's a revenue split or those things. These are things that are negotiated in the process, and that process has not been completed. But we are in active and ongoing discussions with multiple agencies and multiple firms that are looking to apprise us of that. I have spoken directly with Carol, not only about companies that we have spoken to, but also to the extent that they could advise us of who they've had good relationships with in the EPA and who they've had negative experiences with. And that was important because we want to make certain that regardless of who deals with the operations and maintenance of our water treatment facility, they are qualified and they have a good track record. Yeah. Yes.
In terms of the governor's characterization of the severity of what's happening right now, he said there might not be an ability to fight fires, people might not be able to flush toilets, or just in general how he characterized the severity of where we are right now. How accurate?
I would share that we've been in constant discussion with our leadership of our fire department, and they have kept us abreast of what their capacity is. They have yet to indicate that they're unable. But however, we've talked from the standpoint of MEMA assisting with those efforts and making sure they double down with the ability to supplement what our fire department has. And so we feel comfortable with our fire department's reserves, along with the support of MEMA, that if we should meet the unfortunate circumstance of a fire, they will be able to contend with it. Yes.
What sparked the change in leadership at the Public Works Department?
Well, we thought that a realignment was better in order to best address the challenges that we have here. And so no one was let go. There was a reassignment of based on individual strengths, right? And so we believe that the interim leadership we have now has the requisite talent and ability to help move us past where we are at this present moment.
Mayor, 2.5 weeks ago, you told us that you had full confidence in Mr. King and special confidence in the area you tasked him with, and clarified that for us. What changed in that 2.5 weeks?
Nothing. I still have confidence in Mr. King and what I want him to do in the area that we believe that he can be most helpful is still one that he will be working on. Now, I felt that there needed to be a realignment of who people reported to, how communication followed down the chain. And so that's the change that happened. It was a realignment based on what we feel the individual skill sets of our team is. And so it doesn't mean that I no longer trust Mr. King. It doesn't mean that his skill set as a systems individual is not one that is well needed and beneficial to the overall success of our Public Works Department. Yes.
If I may, just two really quick questions. Do we have an assessment of how many service lines customers are affected generally or with that water? And then the second question is just in terms of messaging, there have been a lot of statements of just don't drink the water plainly, but to clarify, if the water is boiled, it's still safe to drink.
We have not gotten an official word from the Department of Health to just say don't drink it, in a blanket way. Right now, the official stance right now is that we are under a boil water notice, and that is what we continue to advise our residents. And your first question, remind me?
It was just, do we have any idea of the number of people affected with low pressure pressure, no water?
We know that we experienced it system-wide. We don't have an exact total, but I can tell you this, and I should have begun with this, is that we have seen steady improvements in the system. There are individuals who did not have water pressure at all yesterday, in which water pressure has returned, and the reports of the tanks is that there are steady gains being achieved each and every moment. In the middle of peak consumption, which is during the daytime hours, we've maintained steady. At night is a moment that we look to have the greatest amount of recovery, and so we saw great recovery yesterday, and there's been encouraging news and signs ever since last night in terms of where we're seeing our tanks come back to.
So that number's gone down since yesterday, or?
No, it's steady at this. It's gone up since yesterday.
Okay.
It's gone up since yesterday. I mean, in terms of the number of people with water. Let me clarify that. The number of individuals, there are more people with water since yesterday, right? Due to the gains that we made in the system overnight, and we've been steady with the production. We don't typically see the biggest gains in the daytime because that is when consumption is at its highest. And so we look to recover even more through the night hours. Yes, evening hours.
In 2020, the EPA requested an alternative water plan for a situation just like this, distributing water to residents. In April 2020, Jackson submitted that plan. It was called the Alternative Water Source Plan Development and Implementation. I believe Keisha Saunders wrote that plan. Part of that plan, maybe the key part of that plan, was acquiring a contract with a third party, like a Kroger or some sort of a grocery store chain, to actually deliver the water. In those years since then, Jackson has not acquired that contract, and the EPA highlighted that as a critical, outstanding issue. Why not?
So first and foremost, we didn't have a contract in place, but we were receiving the donations to meet the need. And so we were getting it by donation and not by expense. But to date, to make certain that we fulfilled the contract standpoint of that and make sure that there was a contract in place to meet that order of consent and go beyond the donations that were meeting that need, you would have seen today in today's city council meeting that we met that and we actually agreed with the Coca-Cola company in order to meet that need. We've been distributing water to residents in the midst of these challenges every single time that residents have been without water. Every single time we've had our constituent services department not only deliver to fire stations, but to personally deliver to our elderly residents and have several water distributions across the city. And so that's where we get into technical violations, which say that we didn't have a contract. But the reality is that we were providing that water. We were just merely taking advantage of the fact that we have high expenses trying to rectify these challenges. And if we had the benefit of corporations who were willing to provide it to us for free, we certainly were taking advantage of it. Thank you. All right. Yes.
Can you speak to whether or not NEMA has contacted the fire chief about distributing water at the city's fire stations? We've heard that they have not contacted them at this point.
I can just share with you my discussion with Mr. McCraney yesterday and today. He said that he would be in contact with them. He said that they would provide assistance to them. I believe that that is going to take place. If it hasn't taken place, whether they have talked at this very moment or not, I can't share with you because I do not know directly.
In terms of just the main issue that's causing this pressure issue right now, you yesterday spoke about the flooding and that impact. The governor yesterday talked about the pumps not working. So in terms of fixing this current pressure issue, is it more the pumps, is it the flood water going down?
It was the flood waters that led to the challenge. Now, what typically happens, O.B. Curtis services the majority of our residents in the city. When O.B. Curtis, which is near the reservoir in Ridgeland, when it has challenges, then we depend on our older water treatment facility, Fuel, right, in order to make up the difference. Fuel was functioning at its regular pace, but as we were looking at Fuel to increase its production, to supplement what O.B. Curtis was missing, we had challenges with a pump that led it to not be able to increase its production at Fuel. And so the challenges at O.B. Curtis was dealing with the chemical composition. The challenges at Fuel, in order to increase the production, was dealing with an inability to get the pump to help to another pump to increase that. Okay.
Sorry, I actually just received word from MSDH. They want to clarify if you boil the water for 1 minute, rolling boil for 1 minute, it is safe to drink. That was directly from Liz Sharp.
Well, you can join me up here, and I appreciate you for sharing that. All right, so that's consistent. Thank you all very much.